From farm to your store in days, not weeks. That's 80 Acres Farms. Did you know that most salad travels over 2,000 miles to reach your plate? But not 80 Acres Farms. Their crisp salad greens and herbs are food less traveled. This means it stays fresher for longer in your fridge. My salad lasts all week long. No more food waste. Oh, and did I mention there's no need to wash this produce because 80 Acres Farms uses zero pesticides. Visit 80acresfarms.com to learn more and find their salads and herbs at your local Kroger.
Hey, thanks for joining me. It's November 10th, and I couldn't be more excited because today is the 40th anniversary of Windows. I know nobody probably ever had Windows 1.0, but it started 40 years ago today. Whoever would have thought that things would have come out the way that they have since those days? Now, Apple wasn't too far behind, but Windows is really what put a lot of things on the map. So happy 40th on November 10th, right here of 2023. I got a great show here today. I talk with a great artist. His name is Danny O'Keefe, who has an amazing catalog of just incredibly deep, wonderful songs. Some would say folk. Others would say, I wouldn't say soft rock. It's not really that, but really, really wonderful stuff. If you haven't heard of Danny, check out his catalog. He's there. Danny O'Keefe. That's O with that little Irish apostrophe. Keefe. Just an amazing artist. He's out with this new release called Circular Turns. Instead of putting out like a box set of greatest hits or whatnot, or whatever buddy wants to catch up with, this is a good catch-up project that was hatched by his record company, and it's a different take on a lot of his more popular songs and all put together in one collection, along with a live release as well that was done at this really neat house up in Minnesota. We talk about that. We talk about a lot of other things, and we just had a really good time. So I hope you enjoy this one. Danny O'Keefe. So this is exciting. You got a great new release out, and this introduces a lot of people to your work that wouldn't have been familiar with it all these years.
Yeah.
So it's really sounds very exciting. How did that all come about?
How did it come about? Len Fico got in touch with me. I hadn't known him before, and he had put this whole list of stuff together and wanted to release it, and it was largely obscure stuff that I've recorded since 2000, and I had some of it on CD, and some of it was just in the archives, and great that people would be able to hear it. I mean, a very few people have heard it unless they either go to my site or go on. I don't even know if it's on my Facebook page. I'm so bad about that stuff. If somebody else doesn't do it, it usually doesn't get done.
Yeah. You have a Facebook team, people who just deal with all that social media. I mean, that's always a challenge for people who are creators. It's like, now we got social media. Now I have all this other junk to deal with. It's like, I just like songwriting. It's like, you got to have like a team in place.
Well, I'm the team until Sunset Boulevard Records came along. So, I mean, I sort of don't care about a lot of it, and
yeah.
I keep
rightfully so, right?
Yeah, with people that I know, and I have a page that anybody that wants to can find it and see what's going on there. But I have a life to live.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't believe the amount of time people would spend on that stuff. It's almost like kind of a crack addiction with social media.
I don't want to be an influencer.
Whatever that is, and people get paid for it, apparently. I never understood that.
No, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, so this is called Circular Turns. It's got 17 tracks over an 18-year period. So going through all that, were you involved in that process of what's going to go on this thing, or was just basically getting Len involved and other folks involved?
The whole thing. I liked Len's choices. I think there might have been 18 originally, and I can't remember why the one got discarded. I think I thought maybe it just didn't work in the lineup as much as anything else. But no, I loved his choices. You know, they're all sort of strange tracks that you know, started out as demos and then kind of got finished. You know, largely all in my friend Gary Shelton's basement studio. You know, and it's all. I mean, it's high tech and low key.
Yeah, and what was the process for like mastering and getting this ready for release? Was that pretty heavily involved?
No, not really. I mean, we had good mixes. We went and tightened them up a little bit, and but they were, you know, they were there, just sitting there. And I mean, I think Len did the final mastering, but Gary did, you know, Gary Shelton did most of the engineering and the final, you know, tightening up processing.
And you have a live disc on here too from this house in St. Paul,
Right.
Minnesota. Yeah, it sounds like a very interesting house that it was recorded from.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, my friend Glenn Elvig is he's a designer, but he's also a musician, and you know, just I mean, he converted what would have been a living room into a stage.
Mm.
And it has a, you know, like a full raised stage and uh, great sound. Uh, he has, you know, video potential as well. And largely it's just word of mouth and friends come whenever he's having a concert. I just did a bunch of stuff with him up in northern Minnesota, which um, fortunately the weather was good, but
Yeah.
be careful when you're up there on the borderline.
It's challenging up there when we get to a certain month. Yeah, minute you get like to October, November, I'm sure it's freezing.
Well, it didn't now, it didn't yet, but just give it another minute and it will.
Yeah, summers are probably a little bit more bearable than what a lot of us are used to. I'm here in the Southeast, so it's like, yeah, I'm just happy to get to October.
Just depends on how much you like black flies and no-see-um and large mosquitoes.
Yeah, no shortage of that. Well, you got a great take on some of your biggest classics. Magdalena is just like a real standout track to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, what was the origin of that song? Coming up with that?
Well, it's a love song, like so many of mine. Um, but you know, love is always a complex emotion.
Yeah,
And, you know, there's
yeah,
there's sharp points as well as blunt ones, and I mean, it was a love song, you know, to a woman who I still know and love very much. You know?
yeah. And some those are some of the best songs. It's like comes straight from the heart. It's like write what you know. That's really where the beauty of that comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also which is really neat, you got a song for the Corduroy Bear movie. That's how did all
Uh,
that come around?
uh, I can't remember the guy's name anymore, but it was he hired, or I don't know so much as he hired us as he just, you know, called us up and asked us if we were wanted to be part of the project. Um, Jay Gruska and I. Jay Gruska is a great arranger, a great piano player and songwriter, and we we read the book and tried to figure what the key points were. I mean, writing for film is always is fraught with danger, but it's also really fun. You never know exactly what they want, and you write something that you think is absolutely perfect and sets the character and the tone and everything, and they go, "No, I wanted it more about his shoes." You know, well, okay, you can't, you know. So they didn't end up making the. Taylor Hackford was going to make the movie, and he in his repertoire he didn't have an animated film, and it was kind of at a period when animated films were for children were starting to do well again, I guess. And I thought it would have been it was a great story, and so we wrote about I think 6 songs or something,
Oh,
and Alone in the Dark with You, I mean, it was just that idea of someone watching the character on the screen, and we've all done that and put ourselves in that character's place. So it was sort of an obvious idea. And now it's, finally seeing the light of day, but I wish the movie had been made.
Yeah, that would have been so nice. But yeah, it gets complicated once you start getting studio heads involved and somebody on Taylor Hackford's level. I'm sure that's got to be a quite a challenge.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't make it, but I got a song out of it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's quite a catalog. And what number album is this in your catalog? Or it's too numerous to count as far as
Well, no, don't have I don't have enough gray matter to remember. It's probably 12. I don't know. I mean, I don't
yeah.
have a lot of it, but 12.
Yeah.
We'll hope
That's
more.
a nice round number, definitely. And some solo and with solo artists, 12 is a great number. So absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you started out with Atlantic Records, and that's quite a story how all of that came about. And the legendary Ahmet, who's really so many have known and worked with. You must have great memories of how all that started.
Oh, it was incredible. Um, and it was also, I mean, very unique. I kind of didn't go about, the whatever the traditional methods would have been. I mean, we a friend of mine who had been in a band from Seattle, and I were trying to put together a band and make a pitch with the record companies, and we didn't even have a car. We didn't have any amps. We had instruments, sort of, and we knew a manager guy's name, my friend's name was Don McAllister, and he'd been in a band called the Daily Flash from Seattle. It's one of the great bands of that period. And so in the afternoon, we'd go in and sit in Charlie Green's office. And Charlie Green and Brian Stone managed the Buffalo Springfield and Sonny and Cher and Dr. John and I don't know who else, but they were kind of big time managers, and most of their acts were on Atlantic. So they had great relationships with Ahmet and Jerry Wexler and all of the people at Atlantic. And so one day we're just in his office, just kicking it. And he's on the phone to somebody, and he says, Ahmet, you got to hear this. This kid wrote me a song. So he motions to me to, get out my guitar and play into the phone, right, as he's holding it up. And so I played Good Time Charlie, and then I played another song called Steel Guitar. And that was it. He went back to his conversation with Ahmet. And then the next day, Ahmet came to Charlie Green's office. I think that David Geffen was his protege in those days. And I think David Geffen was there too, but I'm not positive of that at this stage. And so all the guys that were theoretically going to be in that band were in the room, and we're just talking. I mean, I play a couple tunes, the same ones that I played into the phone for him, and then that was kind of it. We left, and not much more was said. I think that Charlie Green got some money in advance. Couldn't have been too much, and gave us a little bit of money for rent, and that was it. We never heard any more about it. And unfortunately, Don he was fond of heroin.
Oh gosh.
And that basically put the kill switch on. And so I finally got frustrated and came back up to Seattle, which was where my home was, my wife and daughter. And I had nothing going on in Seattle, and so after about 3 weeks or so, I just cold called Atlantic Records and asked for Ahmet. And his secretary, Noreen, came on and said, "What's this all about?" And I told her the story. And Ahmet got on the phone and said, "Yeah, I remember those. Remember, you playing those songs in Charlie's office, and send me a tape." So, I mean, in those days, I mean, all you had for home recorders were the things like web cores, which were tape recorders with, really, really crappy little microphones. And so I just sat there and played 6 songs into the web core and sent the tape off to him. I mean, this is this is naivete at its strongest. And I didn't hear anything. And so after about 3 weeks, I called him up, and he said, "Well, I didn't hear very much on that tape. It was admittedly a really bad tape." I said, "What you heard was Good Time Charlie and Steel Guitar, which were the 2 songs I played into the phone for you." And he asked the guy that was working with him what the 2 songs were, and that guy said, he agreed. And so I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "What do I want to do? I want to make a record on Atlantic Records." He said, "Okay, so we'll go to Muscle Shoals. I'll send you a ticket, and I'll meet you there. Do you have any money?" And I said, "I don't have a thing." He said, "Well, I'll send you some money." And so he sent me an advance check for $10,000, which, like, for me, that was like,
It's a lot. Yeah. Very, index that to inflation. That was the early 70s, right? So it's like,
yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, this is like 69.
69, yeah.
We hadn't even gotten into the 70s. So I went down to Muscle Shoals, which was not an easy plane trip from Seattle. You fly into Atlanta, and then you get another, little plane that hops up to Muscle Shoals.
Right.
And the guys who became the Swampers, they weren't called the Swampers then, just were in that little, I think it had been a garage or something prior on Jackson Highway. And they just had this, funky little studio. They had a 8-track that Atlantic had just sold them, not given them. And we just started cutting stuff. And some of it got used on the first record. We cut Good Time Charlie, but we didn't have a version of it that worked.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite right. The arrangement of it was. And when then we mixed it and put it out, and I think, and Arif Mardin got involved in the mixing of it, and that was kind of became the difference, because he was such a wonderful musician, arranger, and human being. I mean, he's one of my dearest friends over the years, and they still thought that Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues was a hit, and so we went to Memphis and played with the Memphis Boys. And with Arif's guidance, we got an arrangement that was nice and tight and worked. And God bless them all.
Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues, and covered by some pretty big legends there. That's a nice cast of characters. Definitely goes a long way.
And the wonderful thing about it is that the younger players, Charlie Crockett and some of the other guys who are just kind of coming up, they appreciate it, and they cut it too. And I mean, that's the greatest compliment that you get when your song sort of transits generations and holds up.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a huge tribute. And then you had artists way later on like Miranda Lambert who've covered you. So it's got to feel really good.
Yeah, I wish more of them would, just because I'm so greedy. But it's a wonderful thing. And the Miranda Lambert thing came completely out of the blue. I mean, I knew who she was, but I had no idea that she'd been, performing Covered Wagon. And finally, somebody from Nashville called me up and said, hey, it was great. It was a platinum selling record, whatever that means these days.
Yeah. And it's a great take on it too. And it's, do you get an inkling how they're going to cover it, or it's just like, it's out there and I just stumbled on this? It's like, wow, it just kind of just blows you away with their arrangement.
Well, I didn't know that she'd been performing it. I think using it as either encore or closing song or set, right?
So she was used to it. It was comfort.
I had no idea. And I think maybe because of the cover of my record or something, but I mean, she got this idea that I was a hippie, and it was a hippie song. So she kind of dressed, what what she thought was as hippie-esque, I guess. I never put that piece completely together, but I'm so glad that she cut it. It just was a wonderful surprise.
Yeah. Did you expect your sophomore album, which they always say, oh my gosh, the sophomore album, that one is not as easy to get there on the charts, but did you expect that success, or it was just like you put it out there, didn't expect anything? You got a good time, Charlie's Got the Blues, and it's like, whoa, it must have been a very nice surprise.
Well, it was great. I mean, but everybody thought that song was a hit. I mean, throughout the whole process. And I was uh, supposed to be on David Geffen's label, which it hadn't really gotten a name at that point. Um, and for some reason, I didn't sign with him. It was one of the stupider moves that I've made in my life, and I have regretted it ever since, because he was a good guy and he was a great record guy. And I ended up signing with Artie Mogul on Signpost, which went away in about a year, and the distribution for the record went back to Atlantic, and it was largely, a dead issue by then. But I have not always made the wisest choices in my career.
Yeah, I think we all go through those points. Like, I should have done that. You never would have known in the moment, though. David Geffen, I mean, but then it was John Lennon who later joined on that label. So it's like, yeah, legendary. But David Geffen, wow, what a gifted producer.
Well, he was brilliant as an agent at CMA, and I mean, I heard Jackson's first album just on acetate in David's office, and I mean, he played that one very carefully, but he knew he had a major star and a hit record. Um, Very bright man, and now I mean, you see the evidence in the films that he makes as well. So
Yeah. Did you feel like you were kind of like on a treadmill having to like put out albums every year, in the 70s? It seemed to me like back then the record companies were like, yeah, you got to get these out there. Did Ahmed have you under that kind of a contract?
no, I mean, Atlantic was a great place to work with. I mean, to work at, in that they appreciated the artist. They gave the artist as wide latitude as they could. I felt very fortunate, and I got to work not only with Ahmet, but with Arif Mardin, who was a great arranger and a great producer, and somebody that he was not confrontational, but he could just get you to slowly think along his terms, and come into the fold. And it was a very easy and very creative process. And then the musicians, not only the musicians in Memphis, which was a great, very tight group at Chips Moman's place, but also the players that were in New York on the album Breezy Stories. Donny Hathaway and Gordon Edwards and all of those, people that had been, playing on Aretha's and everybody's records. And they just were there in the studios. I mean, people would just drift in. That was really the kind of the icing on the cake, to be able to play with that caliber of player.
Yeah. Yeah. Breezy
Richard
Stories.
Davis, another one.
Oh, yeah. That's incredible talent. Breezy Stories hits its 50th year this year. Angel Spread Your Wings. That's just a total classic that they came out of that.
Yeah, and that was their first pick as a single, and it was a strange time in that they released it as a single, and it did really well in the tertiary and secondary markets. And then there was a House committee, Senate committee, I can't remember, investigation into payola, and everybody in the record business pulled back and waited that out. And it was in September, I don't know, 73, maybe, I'm not sure. I think September 73. And all the money dried up. Well, that was the old days of radio.
Yeah.
And a little money here and there greased the wheels of a single, right? And it wasn't
Yeah.
always money. I mean, the guy like, great custom cowboy boots, you got a pair of those. And, you know, I mean, all that stuff has changed to a great degree because you're not really dealing with radio anymore.
Yeah. It's changed,
So
remarkably. Yeah.
yeah, and you can't call up Mr. Spotify and walk into his office with a new leather jacket and have him appreciate you.
Yeah, tough for artists to get paid these days. It's you can get pennies for how many plays you get on Spotify. It's really tough.
300%. Yeah.
Gosh.
And the other thing is, none of us were very smart or forward thinking, in that no one anticipated these kinds of streaming companies, facilities. So the masters got owned by the record companies, and we kind of had no say. I mean, just comes automatically up there, and if you get paid, your small pittance, that's about what you get, and you don't have any control over it.
Yeah, it's so true. It really is. Coming up with an album title so long, Harry Truman. What was the inspiration on that?
Well, there was a very popular book at the time, and I can't remember. The guy was a well-known biographer of the period, and he had written a biography of Harry Truman. And Truman was an interesting man in that he really was as honest as a politician could be in that kind of world that he was in, And I think he, after the fact, had understood what a terrible thing he had done, by setting the bombs loose on Japan. But it was already in the orders when Roosevelt died,
Yeah.
And there wasn't much that he could do about it except, say, okay, if this is how it's going to go, we're going to end the war. And it did end the war, but it also set the most awesome precedent that the world had ever seen, in that, really leashed the dogs of hell,
Yeah.
those bombs, right? And once you have that kind of a weaponry, it tells you that it's going to be used. You don't put that genie back in the bottle.
Yeah. Were you much into history? Did you read that as a kid and growing up, and were very interested in all of that?
I loved history. I mean,
Yeah.
as a kid, I had the series were called Landmark books, and they were history written for children, and Classics Illustrated. I don't know if you remember those, but
Yeah.
those were my favorite comic books, that you get history in a cartoon form.
From farm to your store in days, not weeks. That's 80 Acres Farms. Did you know that most salad travels over 2,000 miles to reach your plate? But not 80 Acres Farms. Their crisp salad greens and herbs are food less traveled. This means it stays fresher for longer in your fridge. My salad lasts all week long. No more food waste. Oh, and did I mention there's no need to wash this produce because 80 Acres Farms uses zero pesticides. Visit 80acresfarms.com to learn more and find their salads and herbs at your local Kroger.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once, and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Yeah. And you were from Seattle? What was Seattle like many years ago? We all know of the Seattle of the 90s when, Starbucks really hit its stride and all of that. What was it like many years ago? I always wonder about places like that.
I actually didn't. I rarely. I mean, I lived in a town called Wenatchee, so there weren't freeways or anything. So coming to Seattle was a big thing, and I occasionally, it was a foreign world to me. I was born in Spokane, and I'm largely a kind of a byproduct of Central Washington State. So I was very provincial, and but I loved rock and roll, and from my last couple of years of high school, went back to Minnesota and finished school there, living with my grandmother. Then came back to Seattle. Seattle was the place that, instead of Wenatchee, Seattle was the magnet, because it had a music scene. Got to know a guy by the name of Jerry Denon, who was the guy who put out the Kingsmen's version of Louie Louie, which is
cool.
It's the national anthem of Washington State. He was a great guy. I mean, he'd put me in the studio so I could record my demos, and put out a single here and there, seeing if he could get something started. And when I made the deal with Atlantic, he was very gracious and sold my publishing to Amit for a nominal amount, and remained my good friend for many years.
Great people you made along the way as well. So yeah, I mean, Washington State is just gorgeous out that way. I just love that corner of the U.S. But yes, you spent some time in Minnesota, so there was a guy by the name of Robert Zimmerman who you became familiar with. How did that come about with you putting together the song "Well, Well, Well"?
Well. It's sort of it's a joke in a way. I never knew Bob in Minnesota, although he played in a couple of the same coffee houses that I had played, but like 6 months prior, and then he was off to New York, and he was on fire by that time. I don't think he'd made any records yet, but we paid a lot of attention to what he was doing, because he was kind of the first guy that sort of broke out. Dave Ray and Tony Glover and John Kerner were kind of right behind, but they never got that same kind of attention, although they were wonderful players. Ask me again. Where was I going? I got sidetracked.
Bob, your connection to Bob Dylan. Well.
So Tina Snow ran the publishing company for Bob in LA. And she signed me, and, I'd go to Nashville or whatever. I'd put, my songs into the hopper there. And at one point she called me and she said, Bob has this demo that he'd like to see if you could write lyrics to it, right? Well, I appreciated that irony. I don't think Bob ever knew that Tina had found this box and was sending these rough demos. And they were very rough. I mean, it might have been an idea that he had, and it just never went anywhere, and he forgot it and moved on. So somebody collected them in a box. So I listened to the cassette. It was very simple, just one chord, basically, just, flailing on. And in the middle of it, after about, 32 bars of just the one chord, there's a well, and changes chords and goes back to the same basic vamp. So I thought, well, this is sort of a joke. Somebody's, either putting me on or something. But I figured I'd never get a shot at having a copyright with Bob again. We're not going to sit down in a room and write together. So I added another well and made it a song about groundwater, and it turned out that after everybody realized how bad fracking was for groundwater and the environment, it kind of fulfilled itself, But it's a good story, and I enjoy playing the song. I love the song.
Yeah, and translates well live, as you'll see on this new disc set here, the multi-disc set. So it includes just an incredible amount of classics that just really deserve the attention that they need to get. How did you end up going from Atlantic Records to Warner Brothers? What was the turn on that? Because I remember I think Hall & Oates were on Atlantic for a while, and then they ended up on RCA. How did that turn happen?
Atlantic tried to have an office in LA in the same way they tried to have an office in Nashville. but it never really worked. They were really a New York company in their style and artists and attitudes, and they were a wonderful company. But I was in LA and I wanted to make a different kind of record, hanging out with Ronstadt and the Eagles and, all of those different people in LA, and was kind of, that was kind of where my heart was. I was pretty much a West Coast guy anyway, right? So they agreed to basically trade me from one club to another, right? And it was when Mo and Lenny were running Warner Brothers, and I just went over to meet with them, and they liked what I was doing. I had already cut some tracks, and they put me. I'd been with a producer that John Court, who I wasn't completely happy with, and I wanted another producer, so they put me with Kenny Vance, who had been in Jay and the Americans. Wonderful singer, great guy, love him. He's still a dear friend. And so we, found a good studio and just, started putting tracks together. And eventually we got a bunch of stuff that we really liked and Warner's liked. And we thought we had a hit, but we didn't. But you never know when you have a hit or you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, you never do.
Yeah. We thought You Look Just Like a Girl Again might be a strong song. And actually they took it to Sinatra, which would have been a great song for Frank Sinatra. But he was in the process of recording. I think the album was called Trilogy. I'm not sure. I think it was a 3-disc set. And the new songs that he was doing were, I think, all Jimmy Webb songs. So we tried to get in there. Mo tried to get us in there, and we couldn't. And it would have been a wonderful song for Sinatra. And I will always regret I didn't get a song with Frank.
Yeah. I always liked the way he would do certain takes on more modern music, Just the Way You Are, Billy Joel's song. I like the way he covers that. Just puts a lot of his own FS spin on it. It's very nice. So were you in that whole Laurel Canyon scene? Did you hang out with David Crosby, and you said the Eagles and Linda Ronstadt, all of those people?
Linda, not David. I think David was around, but he might have also been starting to migrate up the coast to around Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz. Yeah. I lived on Woodrow Wilson, which was just kind of over Mulholland Drive, but all in that same scene. Harrison Ford was my neighbor on the corner, and I don't know, just a bunch of people all over in the hills around me, and it was a great time, a strange time, but I still have enduring friendships from that time. And you never knew who would be willing just to come into the studio and put a vocal on or harmony on or play a guitar, Lindley or Glenn Fry. It was a good time.
Oh, that Eagles catalog. There's nothing like it. It's just incredible. I saw them once. It's just incredible. I'm sure you saw them in their heyday, whatever a heyday is, but it's just those songs are just timeless. It's the American songbook for sure. Very deep into it.
Yeah. No, and they were very careful in their recordings. They took enormous amounts of time and spent enormous amounts of money, but they knew what they wanted. And time has proven that they got it.
Yeah, complete perfection. Saw them live, and it's like, oh my God, every note. There's just nothing missing. They must rehearse like crazy.
Well, and they were also really good players.
Yeah, real gifted. But yeah, you got a great catalog here. It's just an incredible amount of albums and great singles that have come out of it. And to showcase it this way, I think is a very unique way, rather than saying, hey, here are the greatest hits. This is just a very unique way. So I think I would say kudos to Len for getting that together.
Yeah, no, I owe him a huge debt of gratitude, and that he heard those songs, and appreciated them. That's a great thing.
So as far as playing live goes, you've opened up for some pretty big acts. Was Bonnie Raitt one of them?
Yeah, I played a bunch of gigs with Bonnie. She's been a dear friend over the years. We did a lot of benefits together along with Jackson. Um, and then I've done a couple tours with her. But, I mean, they're really solid people, and they've remained really close friends over the years, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and very, very sorry about Jimmy Buffett lately. That's just but the posthumous songs are amazing. What a gifted artist.
Well, and David Lindley too, so sorry to lose him. One of my favorite people.
Yeah. Yeah, just absolutely amazing. So going into the 80s, then the video era comes in. How did you feel about that at that time? I know a lot of artists were like, hey, look, I'm doing so much here. I get down to the final mix. I just want to get this out and get on the road. But you got to do a video. How did that work with you and the people you work with, the record companies?
Well, that was when I was on, kind of an obscure label, small independent label, Beechwood Records.
Beechwood,
and
yes.
I can't remember the guy's last name, Paul, but he had done a film that we liked, which I don't remember now if it was the Motown movie or not, and he was a great guy. His brother had been in what's the Boston band, the guy's name?
Aerosmith was that?
It's with the guy's name, and he was like the guitar player or something. Peter Wolf was in the band.
Oh, Peter Wolf was in Jay Giles band.
So it was one of the guys in Jay Giles' brother, filmmaker. And it was a lot of fun. He came up here to the Northwest, and I borrowed my friend Reggie's Cadillac convertible, and we just had a ball. It was painless, and it was nice to have it. That was about as close as I was going to get to a single. It was a top 20 on what were called the Americana charts then, but we didn't have enough muscle to punch it up higher. But it made the top 20, and I when I see it, I still like it. I mean, it's just a snapshot of what was going on in 1980, right?
Yeah. And then in 84, the day today, on Coldwater Records, that seemed to do very well. You had a really great single, Along for the Ride, and then another single called Someday. I kind of remember that being on the charts.
Again, they got to number 20, and it was distributed, I think, by Capitol. But
from farm to your store in days, not weeks. That's 80 Acres Farms. Did you know that most salad travels over 2,000 miles to reach your plate? But not 80 Acres Farms. Their crisp salad greens and herbs are food less traveled. This means it stays fresher for longer in your fridge. My salad lasts all week long. No more food waste. Oh, and did I mention there's no need to wash this produce because 80 Acres Farms uses zero pesticides. Visit 80acresfarms.com to learn more and find their salads and herbs at your local Kroger.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once, and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
A classic deal, where they left however many thousands of units, probably vinyl, not CDs, sitting on the docks, and didn't get them out to the store when the record was climbing the charts. So it just it kind of died on the vine twice with both of those songs. And there was nothing that I could do. I didn't have any muscle. And the guys that were running the record company, they didn't have any muscle. And it's kind of a business that required muscle. I don't know what it's like now because I'm not really involved in it. I mean, I'm so grateful that people like Len, understand it and know the vagaries and the intricacies, to get stuff to either get played or streamed or whatever, however it happens.
Yeah, MTV music television turned into something else like a lot of other outlets. So a lot of that stuff ends up straight up on YouTube. So that's where people just go to those channels on YouTube. And you could watch them anytime, obviously. But that's really, it seems to be that's where it's all gone as far as like going with videos. So it's another way of getting your name out there, which I'm sure Len knows all about.
Well, and there's the perfect irony that, oh, this will be great for your career, all this publicity. Well, and then COVID comes along and there's no place to play anymore, right? So, everybody just dies on the vine. And hopefully that's changing. But, where I would, before that period, largely where I would play wasn't in clubs anymore because, I mean, the clubs didn't pay anything and they were always kind of crummy anyway. And it was house concerts, so you'd play for, nice people and their friends would come. And, it was, like we're talking about Glenn Elvig, you could put 100 and 110, 115 people in his living room that had been converted into the Carnegie Hall of house concerts and have a full time and sell CDs and feel good when you were done. The place didn't smell like stale beer and cigarettes. And that whole thing changed, kind of where performance, at least sort of folk Americana kind of performers could play, right? And those are starting to come back again. But there was that period of the COVID years where everything shrunk.
Yeah, very sad. Artists really had to take a hit, and you didn't really make much online, keeping yourself alive on Facebook, doing those live events and things like that. It's really just, you got to get out there and tour. So I felt really bad for a lot of people who were just stuck at home. It was a tough time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it never bothered me too much because how I got in to music, just I couldn't not play my guitar and sing and write songs and all of that. I didn't do it for a career, in the beginning. I did it just because I had to, vent that creative urge. And the guitar was the perfect instrument, that I wanted, as early on as, when I was 7, I wanted to be a singing cowboy, so eventually I got to be as close to a singing cowboy without a horse as I could.
And yeah, done quite well. Some really great tracks here that also come to mind. Siamese Friends, which you did with Alison Krauss's brother.
Yes, Victor.
Yeah, amazing bass player. That really stands out when you talk about the bass.
Well, and he's a wonderful bass player. He played on some of my songs, especially the ones that we wrote together. But he's also, really interesting. He can play stuff on the piano that you certainly wouldn't expect to hear from a Nashville player. He's much more than that. And he just had some songs on cassette or whatever format at that time. And a couple of them just jumped out. And one of them was that track that became Siamese Friends.
Yeah, another standout track, When You Come Back Down. Has that Bill Monroe inspiration. It sounds like an amazing story working with Tim O'Brien and getting that going.
Yeah, we sort of had a bit of a handle on some music, and we're just sitting at his table and kind of throwing ideas back and forth. And he got a phone call from someone about 3:00 in the afternoon that said Bill Monroe had passed. Well, I didn't get it. I love Bill Monroe as a player and, the classic catalog that he invented that became bluegrass. But Tim knew him, and Tim was a mandolin player. So, Bill Monroe was foundation. He was the father of those guys. And he was ready to, call it a day. I mean, it made him feel bad. And then I just said, nope, we got to wrestle this one to the ground. And, within another hour or so, we had that song pretty much. The demo was pretty much what the song was. And then I think that, what was the trio? Nickel Creek.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Those, and they were just kids. And Chris Thiele, I think, I don't know if he was a friend of Tim's, but he had really appreciated him because Tim was a mandolin player and Chris was one of the most amazing mandolin players I've ever heard. And they got a hold of it, and boom, we had a cut that we had never in our wildest dreams imagined we were going to get.
Yeah, incredible stories. This is just an amazing project, and just so many good songs on here that just reach back into your catalog. Are you going to get back out on the road? Do you plan on doing a lot more live performing, or are you just going to kind of take it easy as we go into the future?
Well, I mean, touring as it once was kind of doesn't exist, at least not for me. And it's a killer out there. I mean, we used to go out for, 6 weeks, 2 months at a time and, be playing almost every day. And you can't do that anymore. I mean, at my age, it isn't even COVID anymore. It's just, it wears you out completely. But gigs that make sense, I love playing. I just played some gigs in Minnesota and had a wonderful time. And I mean, the hardest part is the traveling, and schlepping all that stuff, because it's still, heavy suitcase, heavy guitar, and a bag over my neck, and after just a week of it, not even, a whole tour, I was beat by the time I got home.
Sometimes the airline loses things too.
Oh man, if they lost a guitar, where would you be? And a lot of guys actually take guitars on now. You can take them on the plane, but it's always iffy. And the worst thing, that you fear is that it's a crowded plane and the overheads are filled and they tell you, well, we got to put, your guitar, which is now in a soft bag, not in a heavy case. We got to put it in baggage, oh my.
No, that's I remember, I think it was Peter Yarrow who lost his guitar for years. Yeah, I think Delta finally found it, I think.
Yeah, and it was probably a really nice old Martin, if I remember the guitars that he played.
Yeah. Incredible stuff. Well, thank you for stopping by. This has been just fascinating. You got such a history. Now, do you have an autobiography out there, or ever interested in something like that?
I get encouraged to do it. I haven't done it. I write short stories. I don't know that they're sort of autobiographical, but they're also fiction too. So I don't know. I mean, writing a book is a daunting thing. Making a record is much easier because that's what I do. But to just figure out chapter and verse of one's own personal history is not as easy as you might think.
Very daunting task for sure. I think they asked Nathan Lane. I think he's writing an autobiography. He says the hardest part is the remembering and then the writing. So.
Yeah. Other than that, it's pretty easy. You can come up with the title, no problem.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. And you can get this album wherever you get music. It is just an incredible collection. Are you on vinyl with this as well? Is there good artwork that goes along with this release?
Oh, there's great artwork. My friend Bruce McDonald, who lives in Vermont, is one of the most unique artists in that he takes sheets of metal, half-inch metal or whatever of stainless steel, and then he just cuts designs into them that are very complex, really beautiful. He has a gallery called Havoc, HAVOC gallery.com. And you can see his work, but that's what the cover is. And he's an old friend, and his work has just grown enormously over the years.
So big shout out. Yeah. Circular Turns. Get it wherever you get music. You were also very big into environmental causes, the Songbird Environmental Foundation. Have you been into that for a long time now?
It doesn't exist anymore. It was we sunsetted it intentionally. It was a small foundation is not an adequate word. It was just a small environmental organization that focused on coffee agriculture. Because coffee, at one point, coffee traditionally was grown under an arboreal, a forest, right? And all shade grown coffee. And then industrial coffee started cutting down all the forests and just, planting species, varieties of coffee that could stand full sun. And they got bigger harvests. But ultimately, they began to realize that they weren't necessarily making more money because their coffee wasn't as good. And at that period of time, it's kind of post Starbucks, but you had lots of little coffee companies that were specializing in high quality coffee, of which we have a lot now. I mean, it's easy to buy shade grown and organic fair trade coffee in your local coffee shop, but it didn't exist then. And that was part of that revolution. And to be able to take a commodity it was the second largest commodity in the world, and to make a fundamental social change through the use of a commodity is a really powerful thing. You can't really do it with steel, which is the largest commodity, but if it's something commonly used by people and it's doing destructive effects on the environment, you can talk to people now because people have a much greater awareness. And God knows the earth is in serious trouble.
Gosh,
and we need as much sustainable practice as we can manage.
Yeah. So we'll hope for the best as we plot along here these days. Well, I thank you so much for dropping by, and it's just been a total pleasure. And best wishes on this new release.
Well, thank you, Bob. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye. And I hope you really enjoyed that. And stay tuned. We got more great episodes coming up here from my little corner of the world. And just have a great time. Enjoy the rest of November. And before you know it, it's going to be Thanksgiving. So enjoy that as well. I'm sure if you don't have your plans now, I'm sure that's going to be really tough if you start getting things. Not that it's terribly late. It's only November 10th, right? Enjoy and have a great Thanksgiving, and enjoy this beautiful fall time weather that I think most of us are having. Take care.
From farm to your store in days, not weeks. That's 80 Acres Farms. Did you know that most salad travels over 2,000 miles to reach your plate? But not 80 Acres Farms. Their crisp salad greens and herbs are food less traveled. This means it stays fresher for longer in your fridge. My salad lasts all week long. No more food waste. Oh, and did I mention there's no need to wash this produce because 80 Acres Farms uses zero pesticides. Visit 80acresfarms.com to learn more and find their salads and herbs at your local Kroger.